This is Jenica Harper, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft script writing software, the entertainment industry standard for script writing worldwide. My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 23 for Monday, May 30th, 2011. Well, today I am so excited to bring you an interview that I had with Canadian TV and feature writer Jenica Harper. You're going to love the interview. She, as many of the other writers who have been on the podcast, has written for many different forms. She's actually published poetry collections. She's published a graphic novel. She's published short stories, and she's also worked for several years in television and feature development, and is currently writing for, well, she's still writing for all of those different things, and she has a lot of great tips for not only breaking in, but how to get ahead in your chosen part of the industry. So I'm sure you're going to love it. Before that interview, I do want to mention a few things. One of them is the TV Writer Chat happening every Sunday night. Take advantage of it. We've actually had a really, really encouraging response the last couple of weeks, and I urge you to take part, and that is every Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and you just go on Twitter and use the hashtag TV Writer Chat, or you can go to a website where it auto-enters that hashtag for you, and you don't have to worry about typing that every time, but you can get the details at tvwriterchat.com. Speaking about Twitter, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Gray Jones. That way you can find out about people who are being interviewed and get your questions in. Also, go to tvwriterpodcast.com, and you can find lots of great resources, including a database of TV writers on Twitter that has over 700 writers and continues to climb. Make sure you also check out our back episodes while you're there. We've had 23 so far, and there have been a lot of great interviews that are all applicable. Even there's a couple of shows that were unfortunately canceled, like Human Target and V, but the lessons in those interviews are still very, very useful. And as well, I do want to make sure that you know the homework that's on the table. Elephant Bucks by Sheldon Bull, an excellent book about sitcom writing. And I'll let you in on a secret. It's also got some helpful lessons for writing dramatic shows as well, even though that's not the focus of the book, but there are great lessons there. And actually, really, really interestingly, Sheldon broke one rule that we often talk about with spec writing, that you don't write a spec for the show that you want to write for. Sheldon actually was one person who wrote a spec MASH script that got sent to the producers of MASH, and they liked it so much that they got him to write a freelance episode for them. So this guy knows how to write sitcoms so well that even his spec script for a show he's not working for will get noticed. So lots to learn from this book. Elephant Bucks by Sheldon Bull. You can get it from tvwriterpodcast.com, from the store there. And if you do, it helps to support the podcast. So I encourage you to do so. Make sure you check out our partner, scriptmag.com. Lots of great resources there, including Gene Bowerman's Balls of Steel, and also Chad Gervich has a lot of great articles on TV writing from his tremendous TV writing expertise. So anyway, on to my interview with Jenica Harper. Enjoy. This is Gray Jones, and I'm here with TV and feature writer Jenica Harper, who hails from Vancouver. How you doing, Jenica?
I'm really good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's actually a treat because, of course, everybody knows I'm Canadian, and just as luck would have it, we've had quite a few Canadian writers on the podcast in the last couple of months. So it's really neat that you could be a part. And also another neat thing is that even though the industry is not dominated by the female persuasion, we've had quite a few on the podcast as well. Last week and this week, 2 female writers in a row, which is really cool.
Excellent. We may not be plentiful, but we're mouthy. So we say yes, I guess, to the interviews. This is good.
Yeah, very, very cool. So as we always do, we're going to go way back and start with how you got started. And I'm particularly interested because I know that you went to the University of Toronto and then ended up on the West Coast. But where where were you born and how did that fit in?
I was born in North Bay, Ontario, sort of up in the, I was born in Skidoo country, I guess, and lived there when I was a kid. And then we moved around quite a bit in Ontario when I was growing up, and we ended up finally settling in Brampton. So I'm actually from the burbs, the Toronto burbs.
Yeah. So we probably should explain for our American viewers that a skidoo is a device that travels along the snow. Yes, right. A snowmobile? Yeah. It's like a jet ski, but on snow. Yeah. If that helps them. So yeah, that did not even occur to me. That's very funny. Skidoos and bonfires. A bonfire is what? No, I'm sure people have heard of a bonfire. Yeah, so kind of, north-ish. It's not that crazy far north, but it is kind of far removed from the city. But then ended up in the suburbs, and when you grow up in the suburbs, you just spend every possible free hour once you're sort of age, heading into Toronto. At least that's what everybody I knew did. Yeah, sort of loved Toronto, and so did end up going to school there. Studied literature. So probably you've seen, having looked a little bit at my background, that I also wrote poetry, and that was something that, so I do have kind of the English lit geek in me still, and that was what I kind of pursued right away in when I went to university. And it was one of those things that it seemed like something, poetry was something that I actually read, short stories I read, novels I read. They actually seemed like a human being was on the other side of that and wrote them. But, when you're growing up, and I knew that plays were written by people, but, I didn't really make the leap to the movies and TV shows I loved so much were also, just people who had committed to a writing career in this particular field and worked at that and eventually kind of, made movies and TV shows. That hadn't really dawned on me. When I finally did take at the time, U of T didn't have a lot of creative writing classes. They now have a whole program. At the time, they didn't, and so I could sort of piece together a bunch of different courses that were, a poetry one here and sort of a mixed genre class over here, and this one screenwriting one over here, which was just the loosest possible definition of learning to be a screenwriter. But it also kind of gave me a taste for it. And then, I kind of really got it. I was like, oh, this would be really cool. Because, much as I enjoyed theater, I was, I'm a voracious lover of TV and movies. So that, it sort of seems like that's the most direct route to being able to work on something you really love. So, so I guess what happened was when I was graduating university, it became clear to me that either I was not done with school or maybe just too afraid to actually do something other than school. So I was sort of torn between an academic route and the creative route that is really what I wanted to pursue. So I applied to a few different master's programs, and I ended up choosing the one out here in Vancouver, UBC's Creative Writing MFA, which is a 2-year program that is completely creative writing as opposed to partly an academic stream and partly a creative stream. And it's the only one that I applied to that also had this screenwriting. I was kind of coming in as a poet, which was, I don't know, it seemed like the thing to do, to apply as a poet and do this fancy degree. And but in the end, out here, I ended up falling in love with screenwriting yet again. It really clicked that way. And I was working with Linda Svensson, who is one of the writers of Human Cargo. I don't know if you ever saw Human Cargo, but it's a terrific miniseries. And many other adaptations. She's a wonderful writer. And Peggy Thompson, who wrote Better Than Chocolate and a number of other features. So I had, some pretty amazing women who, they happened to be women, but they were, great mentors for me. And after that, I kind of swapped. Poetry kind of ended up taking a back seat. And I still do write in that form, but that's kind of just more for the pure experience of it and enjoyment of it. And it's, it's a small but rich community in Canada, and I'm part of that community too. But TV and movies are really where I wanted to throw myself at a career in screenwriting. So that's kind of when it happened. And that's why I've been out here for 12 years, 13 years, something like that. I think it came out in 98. Well, before we move on to TV and features, because it is fascinating how many different genres you've worked in, really. But before we leave, I'm really impressed with the fact that you have continued your poetry. You've had poetry fiction published in literary magazines, over 25 publications.
Don't be too impressed.
You've published 2 collections of poetry, one in 2006 and one in 2008. So, I mean, this is obviously something that's still very much a part of you.
It is. It is definitely alive for me, yeah. What happened was, it's... I say don't be too impressed because, it's something that I selfishly really love to do still. So Can you hear that siren? I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
I live at a major intersection here in Vancouver. I'm not hurt, if anyone's wondering. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Everybody's going to be okay. So I continue to work in poetry partly because there's no money in it. That it's another way to sort of express yourself creatively and to push the envelope in terms of language and storytelling. My poetry is quite narrative based, so it's pretty accessible for the average reader. But it is, because there's no money in it, it is sort of for the love of the thing, which is can be a really nice break, to take. It can be a really nice sort of change of pace to say, I'm just going to work on something that is because I'm experimenting with something, not because I need to be able to sell it or use it as a sample to try and get a job. And that's what I love about it. So I just continue there's not a lot of pressure on that part of my career. So I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, short stories in particular can transition into features. Have you found any of your poetry or fiction motivating your other narrative work?
In a really direct way?
Well, yeah, like have you been inspired as you wrote a poem and thought, oh, that would make a great idea for this? Well, because I know you did do a graphic novel that was adapted.
Yes, I guess I have, and I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to articulate how that has worked. It's been sort of a really messy process, but there's been a few different things. One was in my first collection of poetry, there is a long poem that's kind of the heart of the book. And I did adapt it into a short film. So that is out there because the material was kind of conducive to a lot of different ways to approach it. So I had approached it in this kind of more cerebral and meditative way in the poem, but it translated pretty well to one scene between a couple and kind of maybe the beginning of the end of their relationship, and it kind of plays out visually. And so it was actually really a neat experience to take an idea that I felt like I had gone all the way with in the one form, but then the minute that you kind of shift your perspective, you find something new in it and kind of get excited about it again. It was really neat. So that was one. My second collection of poetry is one long narrative. It's sort of short poems, but they add up to a story. And I've had conversations, for sure. It's very early, but I've had conversations with a couple of people about possibly trying to adapt it into a short or even possibly a stage piece, a kind of art installation stage piece, which would be really suitable for this particular story. So yeah, I do find that it kind of fuels. It's just really good practice, I think, to think about the material in different ways. I do often, that graphic novel that you mentioned. So I wrote this comic called Abigail's War, and I originally had the idea for it as a TV series. It's a period piece, so it's kind of a tough sell. Worked really well. It's quite a beautifully, the artist was really wonderful, and it's kind of a beautiful comic. And now we got telephone funding to do the draft of it as a feature. So it's kind of, really that idea has run the whole gamut of, now I need to write a book of poetry about it, I guess. But, it has gone through all these different sort of iterations. And I guess that just means I am really taken with this particular idea, and I want to see it kind of grow and maybe actually be seen in some other form. So, yeah.
Well, it is a really interesting thing that, especially if what you love is story, but it's not locked to a particular genre or medium. Often it will evolve, and there's life inside that story that you don't necessarily know what the best way to tell that is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's I mean, I like that. I think I completely respect people who say, I only think in features, or I only think in series, TV, or I only think in prose, novels. And again, still okay, still not hurt. There it goes. I'm a little annoyed now, but I'm not injured in any way. For me, it's good practice because I like the idea of maybe working, in adaptations and that kind of thing. So I like having the practice of kind of having these different perspectives on the essence of a story or the essence of a character or even an image, Poetry and screenwriting have a lot in common in the sense that, unlike, say, a lot of prose, like a lot of novels, poetry and screenwriting deal very much in the image to tell, telling a story, in economy, there's no wasted space in a good poem. So a lot of people that I know a number of people that actually work in both forms and people do sort of feel like they mesh well. They marry well.
Very, very cool. So moving off of poetry now and on to screenwriting and television and short films. From the point where you graduated with your MFA in screenwriting, or creative writing rather, from the University of British Columbia in 2000, what was next?
What was next was a bunch of stuff, I guess, at the same time. The very first thing that happened was my thesis advisor sort of encouraged me to get out there and talk to people. I hope this is good advice for some people who are just starting out, but, if you do that thing where you ask somebody who is doing something you might like to do someday, if you can buy them a coffee or a beer and just talk to them about, the industry, people often say yes.
Yeah.
They're willing to take their time. It's amazing. And people are kind of, either everybody gets that, they were there once on the other side of the table, or everybody likes talking about themselves and feeling smart and feeling like they know stuff.
Yeah.
Probably a combination of both. But I asked people, and people were happy to go out for a drink and just talk. And one of the people that I approached was someone that I had met through sort of a panel discussion, a visitor in class, actually, a guest speaker. At the time, there was a CBC show in production, a drama called These Arms of Mine. And Phil Savas, who was a wonderful man and producer and writer and many other things, he and his wife, Susan Delagull, had created this show together, and it was, they had shot a short first season, and they were shooting sort of another half a season. And I took Susan out for a drink, and she said, look, I know you're sort of looking to get into TV, and there's she mentioned that there was this fellowship with BC Film that, and I think they still have it when they have the funding. Basically, you do an internship in a story department. So you go in, and BC Film picks up part of the money, and the production picks up part of your weekly wage, but you get a wage for the week, and you go in and you kind of experience everything in the story department. We weren't successful in getting that fellowship. It was really competitive at the time. There were tons of shows, like Da Vinci's Inquest was still on, and it was a really kind of a hot time for Vancouver, so there weren't actually enough to go around. She says, not like she was rejected in any way. So, we were disappointed we didn't get it, but then they said, you know what, come work for us anyway.
Oh,
so
great.
they managed to find a budget for me to come in as the sort of assistant to the story department. And it was great. So I spent a bunch of that summer and fall of the year 2000 doing research, running out and getting stuff, sitting in all the tone meetings, sitting on writing notes meetings. And just really seeing how a TV production kind of worked, which was hugely intimidating. Sort of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
When you haven't seen it before, just seeing how script distribution works and rewrite pages and how they get distributed is absolutely daunting. But, it was, you need to get in there and see how that works before you're in charge of it, say. So it was a great experience, and it was, they were really generous to bring me in. And then that kind of really solidified that TV was where I wanted to be. And then oddly enough, I started picking up these gigs that were feature based, just as I was pushing at TV. So my strategy was kind of apply for everything, keep writing specs, start working on my own pilots and see where I could get with them and meet people, try and meet more people in the industry. That was my strategy. And then oddly enough, I started having sort of some luck in paid work in terms of getting hired to rewrite features or collaborate with somebody to write a feature. And, many of them were in development and didn't go anywhere. And one was produced and it was uncredited and things like that. But there was money coming in, and I felt like, okay, it's not paying the bills yet, but it's encouraging, really encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while there, I ended up doing more feature work and then getting more feature stuff in development of my own and story editing as well, which I don't think is a common thing in the States. In Canada, it's sort of a career that can run parallel to a feature screenwriting career.
Yeah, which actually it might be good just because we do have a lot of U.S. listeners to talk about that, because I know it's been mentioned in passing a few times, and I didn't really think about it that way. But in the States, what will tend to happen for features is you write something up to a certain point, and then it just gets yanked away from you, and then it gets sent to a completely different writer who doesn't even talk to you, and they take it over, and because of guild arbitration, what can often happen is they want to change as much as possible so that they can get their credit.
To get that percentage.
So here's somebody who doesn't have the creative vision of the person who came up with it, walking in, changing as much as possible to start, and this can happen over and over and over and over again. I find it really, really interesting about the Canadian system that I hear of a lot of people being hired as story editors to come in and
work with
the writer. So say there might be something wrong with the script, or there's something that's not happening right, but the person with the original vision is still there, and working with another person to make it happen. And boy, I think Hollywood could learn a thing or two from that.
Yeah, it's pretty civilized. I think that American model can happen here. I think it can happen in the sense that, you know, it's not a studio necessarily. It's maybe more. It's a producer, maybe a production company might, you know, have contracted the writer and decide to go another way. But I'm not actually even sure. Our guild might protect us from the really egregious version of that that you hear, those horror stories. You hear, you know, there's all those famous stories of, you know, oh, so-and-so got sole credit on this, and they only because none of the other writers' percentages, you know, added up to enough to get the credit or whatever. Crazy stories. I don't know if it could literally happen, but the culture of it happening is definitely not how it works up here. That it's much more, story editing is a collaborative thing for sure. I mean, that's not to say, like, I have done a couple of, like I said, sort of rewrite work, which can be, I am the second writer to come in. This has always been amicable. It was either a first-time writer that was on board with another person coming on, or it was a writer that was just done with a project, had no investment in it anymore, and allowed it to happen. That I experienced as well. But the story editor really, you know, from my perspective, the story editor is the producer and a funding body are paying me to help the feature writer get through the next draft that is the movie everybody wants to make. So it's really, instead of there being a culture of, you know, studio likes idea and script and tolerates writer until they are no longer comfortable that the writer's going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. Instead, it's like you're always kind of invested in that this is the writer's project too. And you're kind of teaming up, producer and writer and maybe director and maybe story editor. You're all kind of teaming up to try and get the script into shape and as strong as it can be so that A, it has the best chance of getting greenlit, and B, makes a good movie.
Well, and it's interesting because, again, another thing that's not common in Hollywood is there's not a lot of TV writers that bounce back and forth with features. In Canada is very, very common. But what I'm hearing is that story editing a feature here is just a little bit more like a TV process, because it's a more an ongoing collaboration to get this feature made as compared to the Lone Ranger solo writer.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's an interesting way to phrase it, because I think you're right. I mean, it is sort of, you know, you've put together a little department of people that are trying to help this draft be in the best shape it can be. And I have to say, right now I have a couple of features of mine in development. I'm working with a story editor, the same story editor on both of them, and it's amazing to feel like somebody else who has no, you know, there is no agenda there beyond being support for the writer. I mean, they do have an agenda to the producer in that they're trying to help the writer meet what the producer's expecting you to get, you know, get to, but that there's no, you know, it's like it could not be less insidious. It's completely a person to talk things through with, a person to bounce ideas off of. And often the story editor provides full-on ideas, like maybe this scene should be this, and it should be in this order, and this should happen next, and what if you did this for the ending? And when that happens and it's worth doing, it's really exciting because you feel like you have an extra brain at work on your story.
So it's like having a writing partner without the long-term commitment.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow, which is really cool, because often that's one of the reasons that people are afraid of having a writing partner is because of the long-term commitment. So
right, and it's kind of it's a complicated relationship, whereas the writer-story editor relationship, not complicated, not really.
Very, very cool. Well, let's hop back onto the chronology. So you also worked as a script analyst and still do for BC Film, Movie Central, Praxis Center for Screenwriters. That's a lot of names. But tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you're outing me. I have, yeah. So I think people do this. So is this even clear what this is? I guess I should explain. In Canada, we have, our film industry is so largely based on these government bodies that have money to distribute, to support features and TV being made in the country, because we just don't have a studio system or enough people or money to sort of, for it to be self-funding. At least that seems to be the problem. So there are these government bodies that give out money, and you apply. You have to go through these, sort of kind of like a grant application. And on the other side of those applications, these bodies hire readers who are somehow, writers or story people, and you get sort of paid to read a script and write a report on it and describe its strengths and weaknesses. And for some of those agencies, they want sort of, the marketability, the really, like, is there an audience, and is this script going to reach that audience, and that kind of thing. So, so I did that for a number of years. That was sort of, I've kind of stopped doing it lately. And I say that not just because I don't want people to egg my apartment or anything. Script readers don't necessarily have the best reputation, and it's because, well, I don't know. I think it's sort of a complex thing. First of all, it's this blind thing. So, you never know who's on the other side. And I'm always receiving these on the other side as well as the writer, getting back these reports of, what's wrong with my script. And you're like, what do you know? Shut up. But it's, I think, a lot of the script readers I know really are trying to be as respectful to the material as they can, and to really get what it was the intent, whether or not it's, our cup of tea, and really honestly say, who's going to see this, and are there enough people that want to see this? And I think a lot of analysts like me wanted, were really pushing for more marketable features. So it was sort of like, you'd get a more positive report if it was a feature that it seemed like, if I thought my mom would go see the movie, wow, really exciting, because then I can see how there'd be this really wide audience beyond people who are already in film, or beyond, getting people to come out to a Canadian feature can be hard. So, there's not a lot of money for promotion, and we don't have the celebrity system the same way. Paul Gross can't be in everything. So, it can be hard. So I did do that for a long time. Yeah. It's sort of, the script reading is for a lot of people can be, kind of in tandem to doing story editing for features. A lot of, like, I know that in Vancouver, Telefilm's approved script reader list is almost entirely the story editors who are busiest in this city as well. They're the same people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is people who care about story. If anyone's wondering, we care about story.
Cool. So jumping ahead a little bit. So you did a bunch of script analysis and some development work, and you did some feature rewriting, and also you co-created a TV pilot in 2001, Emily's Bookshop.
I did, yes. Yeah, that was that had a shot at being on TVO. We were almost on TVO. But it sort of, like a lot of things, died. But it was a pilot that was shot, and it had puppets.
Puppets,
it's
interesting.
Really cool. It's really cool to write for puppets.
Oh, yeah?
One day I want to write for puppets again. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And then just to move ahead, so then in 2003, you got an opportunity to actually be an instructor at Vancouver Film School, which is one of the more respected programs in the country.
It was great. Yeah. It's a really good program. It's an incredibly rigorous program. It actually, no disrespect to my alma maters, but the 1-year writing program at VFS made my master's degree look actually kind of relaxed. So yeah, it's pretty great. And there are a lot of really dedicated people teaching there. And so and it's one of those things where when you have to teach something, you really continue to learn it and continue to practice your own. And there would be times that, some of the instructors would be like, okay, well, the students are writing this and this term in this number of weeks. So let's do that as well. Be like, oh, okay, well, I should write a pilot in 6 weeks, and develop the world and a Bible and stuff, because that's what we're asking them to do. So, so it was great fuel that way. Very cool. And then, after that, you did more development and rewrites and short film, Nostalgia Boy, 2005. And then when did you break into television, or am I getting ahead of myself? Anything significant? You did quite a bit of feature work in that time. But what was your way of breaking into TV? Well, I will say all of that time, all of those years, those many, many years, I was always, like I said, always pushing at TV. TV was TV is a great love of mine. And I really wanted to be working in the industry, and really felt like I would be at home in a story department, but hadn't really had the shot. So I was constantly, I was writing a spec every year for sure. And for a number of years there, kind of was interviewed for a number of sort of being the junior person on the team, and for a variety of reasons it didn't pan out, some of which was being in Vancouver instead of Toronto. Sometimes it's like, there was one case of, I haven't seen a lot of sexism in my experience, which is great, but this one time it was hilarious because there was clearly a real women-driven show and staff and showrunner. And we had I had a really good interview with them. And what it came down to, they told my agent what it came down to was their whole staff was women, and they needed the junior person to be a dude.
Oh, no. So, reverse sexism.
I was like, well, you know what? Okay, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Because, there were so many women working there. It was great. But I was on the radar a bunch of times and still continuing to write new stuff. And, I had a couple of series ideas of my own optioned that, kind of went out, and people at broadcasters got to know me a little bit that way. I don't know if they'll remember me. Hopefully they do. But, shows that didn't go, but, I kind of had some great experience developing with some producers. And then the big moment was, I applied for an award called the Global Writer Apprentice Award. That is Googleable. You will find the right thing. And what it is Global, alongside Banff, kind of offers there are a couple of different programs. One is the more emerging writer program. They also have a showrunner program. So they kind of have both ends of the spectrum. They're offering these amazing experiences. The first thing is they send you to Banff for free. The registration is covered. Your stay is covered. Everything is free, and they help set you up with meetings, but also you're just free to set up meetings with whoever you want. So I got to go to Banff and meet other people that were in the same boat as me, and we kind of got to know each other and had just a ton of meetings. And so that was an amazing experience. But the other part of the award was that you get a 1-month internship on a show of theirs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was actually how I got onto Shattered. So Shattered was a 1-hour police procedural that featured a homicide detective who also was suffering from DID, multiple personality disorder.
Wow.
And yeah, so I knew I had a month internship on that show. And so my philosophy when I went into the story room was pretty much, well, I don't really have anything to lose here. There's not a lot of use to being quiet and observant for a month. So I kind of said, the showrunners were really friendly, and I said, if I'm ever overstepping the bounds, and if I'm ever being annoying, just tell me. It's fine. But I kind of told them, I was like, I'm going to go for it. So in the room, I ended up, I was really honest, and I expressed my real opinions, and I tried my best not to be too shy and too passive. And I pitched ideas, and some of the ideas they really liked, and we developed them further into story ideas for actual episodes. And so within that month that was, what I was given, I either convinced them or browbeat them into keeping me. And so they kept me on as story editor for that first season, and they gave me an episode. And so that was a real, the better chunk of a year on that series. So that was my real first trial at the Room, and it was everything I hoped it would be. And so I knew, I'm like, well, I'm committed to this now for sure.
Very, very cool. And good on you for taking that opportunity. I know it's tough. It's tough when, even though you're in the industry, when you're not in the part of the industry you want to be in, and the clock is ticking, and it's funny because you have so much to offer, but it seems like the younger people who have nothing to lose are taking those chances, and it's important as a more mature person that you also take those chances.
Yeah. And I have to say, that award that I won, that is clearly like an emerging writer award, mm-hmm. I thought, I'm going to be old for having won this award. And, when 6 of us won that award that year, and we were all almost the same age.
Wow.
We were all like mid-30s-ish. And so I thought, okay, this might just be how it is for a lot of us, that we all had credits of some kind. We had all been working. We'd all been paid to write, but hadn't had the shot in the room. Mm-hmm. And so that actually was probably a moment of it's a little bit of an epiphany moment, because it was sort of like, okay, just relax, would ya? And that has really helped. So, it is what it is. But I also have since worked with people who are not in their 30s, and no one seems to have any problem hiring somebody who's experienced and older. So I sort of feel like, okay, there's a lot of years left. It's not necessarily a 25-year-old's game. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very encouraging. Very encouraging.
Yeah.
And before we move on to the most recent stuff, I was interested in the fact that you won an award for being a stand-up comic as well.
I did.
So how did that enter the picture?
For years, my husband threatened to buy me classes, stand-up comedy classes, as a present. And for years, I was like, that's crazy. That'll be a waste of money. And then one year, I was like, maybe that'd be fun. And I told myself, I'm going to try this. And the class was really kind of a workshop. It was a pretty fun class, but it was a lot of, homework was going away and writing jokes during the week and coming up and coming up to the microphone during class and just delivering the jokes and trying to get the laugh and trying to make the jokes better. And so I treated it like an opportunity to learn how to write comedy better and not worry so much about the performing, because I don't consider myself a performer at all. But it was great for both of those things. It was great for learning how to write and structure a joke better, and it was really great for bravery, mm-hmm. for just feeling like, I don't know, for me to go on stage as a comic, I had to just convince myself that it was all just play and it didn't really matter at all. Like, really, come on. I mean, we're not saving lives. We're not, what is the absolute worst that happens here? I cry? That's nothing bad. It's fine. I'll get over it, So, and I didn't cry. I didn't cry on stage. Mm-hmm. So that was good. But it was an amazing experience, and I did it for a while. But what happened for me was, as you noted, I have written in all these different forms and have kind of at least experimented in a bunch of different kinds of writing. And for me, the comedy became clear to me that my heart wasn't in performing. Mm. And what I saw around me at, these bars and coffee shops was people who were really committed to it. Mm. And I thought, well, I'm really committed to my thing over here, which is TV, but I'm not committed to this, and I'm not willing to spend 5 or 6 nights of every week going out there and performing and getting better and writing new material and all of that. My heart's not in that. And I started to feel like it was a bit of a sham. I can't just keep performing the same material and every now and then going out and doing something at a club. I needed to, I think, either kind of get in or out. And I decided to get out and focus on my other stuff. Mm-hmm. I got plenty going on. I got plenty of ways to be rejected. I don't need to be a stand-up comedian. So that it was a phase. It was like, some girls in college experiment some ways, and some of us experiment with stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and at least you walked out with an award, the
I did.
funniest.
I still have the trophy.
Funniest new female comic in Vancouver, which is pretty impressive.
Thank you.
And so shattered the barrier between you and television.
Beautiful.
And so from there, it seems like things really started happening. So tell me about the last couple of years since Shattered. A few different shows, also a number of projects optioned, lots of stuff.
Yeah, the big stuff, I guess. It was interesting how, I don't know that a lot of it necessarily comes directly from the one job, because a lot of things happened kind of in 2009 for me, and to me, the lesson of them, or the way I kind of think of them, is that I'm one of those people that kind of plants a lot of seeds, or however you want to call it. I had a lot of things that were sort of out there, and some of them finally clicked. Some of them finally got going. And so one of them is this mini-series that I have in development with the production company in Vancouver is How Sound, and our network is Showcase. And so 2009, that trip to Banff, in fact, is when Showcase said, yes, we want to put this into development.
Wow.
So, it was an exciting time, and it's been a great process. It's a huge beast. It's 4 hours, so it's sort of two episodes, 2 hours each, and so it's been a huge task to write it. And structurally, if you think about it as kind of like a Traffic, that would help. Sort of a multi-story, multi-character exploration of a sort of a political and cultural issue. That's what that miniseries is. Mm-hmm. So that has been something I've been working on a lot, and we're waiting to see if we're going to another phase with that. And then around the same time, I got a go-ahead on this script called Clockwork Girl, which is an adaptation of a kid's comic, and that it's in late stages of production, actually. It's in the works right now, and it's got a bunch of voice actors that are amazing, like Jeffrey Tambor and Brad Garrett and Alexa Vega, who is from Spy Kids, and Jesse McCartney. These guys are all the voice actors for the movie, which is really kind of cool.
And it is an animated feature film.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's CG animation, and it looks beautiful.
Very cool.
So I'm excited to see that. Yeah. So that suddenly got a green light, and then I guess post Shattered, the two big things that happened are that Abigail's War, that feature that I mentioned, was a comic first. Mm-hmm. We got sent a draft from Telefilm on that, so that's been really exciting working with Paul Gertz and Zeros to Heroes on that.
And that's being adapted for a feature film.
Yes, that's a feature. Yes, and then a big part of my life now is Mr. Young, of course, which is a multi-camera sitcom, sort of a family sitcom for YTV. And we are in between seasons right now. So we finished season 1 in April, mm-hmm. and we go back. The writers go back to start season 2 in June. Although, in fact, we're already writing. So really excited to go back and expand on the experience I got there. It's just an amazing experience up there. Very cool.
So tell me mm-hmm. about writing a half-hour multi-camera family show as compared to all of the other forms that you've worked in.
Wow, totally different, and yet, I mean, the learning curve was huge for sure, and probably the biggest difference is just that the story department is so collaborative. Like it's a real old school sitcom in the sense that, the 7 of us sit around kind of a boardroom table. We're all looking at these monitors that has the script in question, the script we're working on that week up on them, but it's the writer's assistant that's actually doing the typing. And we don't do any typing. We just look at the script and we pitch out loud. It's just a constant stream of pitching story suggestions and solutions, but especially pitching jokes. The way we work, I guess, is we will often brainstorm story ideas together, mm-hmm. and then we'll often break a story together. So we'll actually break down a story into its beats, an A story, a B story, and break it down into its beats. And then a writer will go off and write a draft. And that's the only time that a writer on a comedy like this is sort of on their own writing. Mm-hmm. And then they come back with a draft, and then as a group we rewrite it. We make it stronger, structurally or whatever, and we especially punch up all the jokes. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really fabulous, and we're really lucky that we like each other because it is long days where you're staring at each other's faces all day. And I cannot imagine what it would be like if you didn't really like and respect the other writers in the room because when you're just pitching jokes, it has to be okay that you're going to say things that aren't funny and that aren't good. You know, it really has to be sort of a trusting place and come from a place of, I'm willing to throw this out there knowing that it might not be the thing, but you might now have the idea that is the thing, you know? So if you didn't trust each other to not, make fun of each other, to not disrespect each other, it would be hard. But instead, we're really lucky, and it's been really great. So yeah, some writers here in town and a couple from Toronto learning how to work in this form. We're kind of being trained to be able to work on a format like this. And, you know, hopefully, a lot of people now are seeing the success of this show and hoping that we might be able to get some more multi-cameras going in the country, and especially in Vancouver. We could really use another couple shows out here since a bunch of things have shut down. So yeah.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So we're going to start to wrap things up in a minute. Typically towards the end, we talk about tips for breaking in. And I know we've covered a few things already. I know you talked about setting up coffee times or beer times with writers to pick their brains and to get connected.
Yeah.
Another thing you talked about was planting a lot of seeds of different kinds and watering those. And another thing that you talked about was being aggressive when you get that opportunity, and also writing fellowships and different opportunities like that. But apart from all of those, if you were to counsel somebody who was, say, you 12 years ago, what would you say are the tips you've learned now on breaking in?
So many of those are really I'm glad you noted all of those, because I believe in all of those things. One thing that I often think of, it's sort of about the being aggressive, but aggressive might even be too aggressive a word. It's funny about that word. It is the idea of networking and not being afraid of that as something that is somehow, a really cheesy or cynical thing to do. Because I think at first, and if you're I'm one of those people that I can't figure out if I'm shy or not. I'm maybe more awkward at times than I am shy, but it can be really hard to figure out what that means. I think when people say, you have to network, it sounds like you have to be like a politician shaking hands and kissing babies, or it's hard to know exactly what that means. But I think what it really just means is, get to know people and make friends in the industry you want to work in. It's not hard to do that. You can always go out and, well, if you're in a city that has any kind of industry going on, it's not that hard to do, because you can go out to, film festival stuff. There's always classes being put on. There's parties during different times of the year when there's different kinds of festivals. And you meet people, and at first I think you end up hanging out with people that are more in the position you're in. And then as time goes by, different people have sort of different responsibilities within the industry, and suddenly someone in development, and someone who's a producer's assistant, and this person over there. And suddenly you have people you can ask for advice, or you have people that you can ask to read your stuff, and that it's kind of building that, because I sort of feel like after a while I finally got it, when I finally saw how much energy and how much time goes into the making of a feature or a series, and that people are going to be sweating. They're going to be sweating it 2 years after it's shot. They really have to love it. Yeah. They really have to be into it. And life's too short to want to, spend a lot of time with people that you don't want to know, don't want to be in a room with. So, if you can figure out how to be somebody people don't hate being in a room with, that's kind of good. And I think that that's part of it. It's like finding those people that I'd want to work with this person the minute that it happened. A story I kind of like is, I have a friend who writes and produces on Mad Men, and she and her husband are writing partners, and they had a lot of experience and a lot of credits, but they weren't on shows and movies that struck you as Mad Men prep material. They were, they actually did a bunch of Olsen Twins stuff. They did like Baywatch Hawaii. They have hilarious stories. But what happened was, the creator of Mad Men, when he finally got his show up, they were good friends back in the day, and he called them up and he said, "You two are coming on my show."
Wow.
And that's like sort of the peak kind of version of that story. But I think that kind of story happens all the time. Eventually the people that you came up with, when you were younger, are starting to be the people that get to work on a show and can recommend you, or even get a show of their own. So I do think the people factor is really important. So not even just, asking more senior people if you can treat them to a coffee and pick their brain, but also just building a community. It's like, if you can think about it as not so much schmoozing as making a community of people that are like-minded and want to make stuff maybe together, but definitely, kind of support each other along the way, then I think it's a healthy way of thinking about what networking is.
Well, actually, there have been quite a few people on the podcast that have said pretty much the same thing. And
oh, good.
I know that, the further I get into the industry, I talk about this even just, I work primarily in editing, but it becomes less and less and less about the content or the type of the show, and more about who I want to work with.
Yeah. It just makes sense, right?
Because you want to enjoy coming to work, and enjoying coming to work is a lot of who you're with.
Yeah. Otherwise, how long are you going to last? You're just going to want to quit and take up some sane business.
Yeah.
And that's no fun. So, yeah, I think that's, the sort of the most naive version of myself. That's what I didn't know, is that it's not something to be ashamed of, this idea of networking. I think people who aren't in the industry, there's a kind of derogatory vibe about the idea of schmoozing, which is I think kind of a stupid word, because it does sound like all you do is go to cocktail parties or something. But that's what I would have wanted to know, I think. That, and just, apply for stuff. Just reach for it.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get it.
Might as well be you.
Why not you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I guess we'll end it here. You've been very, very generous with your time. And one thing before we go, you didn't say anything about being an adjunct professor at UBC as well.
It was brief.
Yeah, it was brief. Okay, so you helped out a little bit. But wow, you've got a lot of projects on the go, and it sounds like things are really hopping for you, which is awesome, especially in Vancouver. I know I've spoken with other Vancouver writers that were feeling like things were a little harder there than this part of the country. So
I don't know why, but I happen to be lucky right now. I'm sure everything, I think, sort of, there are spikes and valleys, and I happen to be enjoying being busy, but hopefully we're just going to get a lot more production stuff happening out here, and everybody will be working more.
Very, very cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really think that people are going to be very encouraged by all of the things that you've shared.
I hope so.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks so much.
Okay, take care.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web. And by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide.